All right. How you doing, folks? Ron Raymond here from the Raymond Report for a Tuesday, November 10th. I'm always here with my good friend, co-host Ross Benjamin of RBWins.com. How you doing, Ross?
Doing very well, Ron. How about yourself?
Yeah, you know what? Smiling like a butcher's dog, eh? After finally a good weekend of NFL, college football, NFL. Ross, the Rain Report. The one thing with the Rain Report that I it's almost like a hidden. When I was building it, it's like I didn't really realize it, but it gets stronger once you get more volume and data into the system. And I was fortunate enough to go overall 4-1 with our members picks and with the free picks 5-1, and we gave a lean on the Jets last night. So pretty good NFL weekend, and 4-2 with our college football. My best bet was Northwestern this weekend. So you know what, like you say sometimes, right? If you don't pump your tires, no one else will. And
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely, buddy. When and bottom line is too, we're transparent when things don't go well. So
yeah.
That's the difference between us and a lot of other guys. And everything's documented. So, Ron, I went 2-3 in Sunday on the NFL. And then I gave my clients the Jets yesterday, took a little bit of flack for doing so. And boy, oh boy, start to finish, should have won the game outright. They found a way to self-destruct. Bad teams find ways to lose, but they covered inside that number. And these double-digit home underdogs, when I took them yesterday, they were plus 10. Home underdogs of 10 or greater have now gone 4-0-1 against the spread this year, Ron.
Wow.
So something to keep an eye on. And I have some really good angles if that situation does arise in the future that I'll go over with the listeners on the show.
Yeah. And you talked about it on Friday, on Football Friday. Great show, Football Friday. If anybody missed it, it's up on our YouTube channel. And you said, watch out for that Dallas and Pittsburgh game, the double digits. And sure enough, it almost pulled through,
Yeah, almost won outright too. I mean, Dallas closed at 14.5, but at the time it was 14. And the double-digit home underdogs, especially within the parameter of plus 10 to plus 14, Ron, very strong.
Yeah, Mrs. Raymond was a little upset last night. She's in the survivor pool with the rest of her teachers. And she had the Kansas City Chiefs, and and there are only 4 left now. They started with like 50, and there's 4 of them left. And she had Casey on Sunday, and there had 3 for people in the pool had New England last night. So she was looking good.
Boy.
Yeah, she was looking good till
boy. Yeah, that's a heartbreaker.
Oh yeah, I told her, I said, so you think
there's only 4 people left, and the other 3 had New England. She would have been a winner by the end of week 9. Wow.
Yeah, I said, you're going to send Cam Newton a Christmas card this year?
Yeah. If I can get Linda to handicap that good, we'd be a hell of a team, I'll tell you. But she more or less just asked me, well, who do you need? But, again, it goes back to having a woman in your life that understands what you do. Because, we're not in the normal realm of livelihoods. So,
hey, Ross, let's talk about that for a second, just real quickly. Look at where we came from 19, say, when I started back in 96 and really got going like in 2000, how we struggled at the beginning to get people to accept online gaming. And like, I remember going and trying to get advertising in major newspaper across North America. And they'd look at you like, no, we don't want your kind here. We don't want no advertising of that in our paper. And now you look at everything. You got everybody of every age involved in sports betting. You got shows about it on TV now. Now ESPN's getting, like, the whole world has made a 180 on this, right? Yeah. So you know what? It was fun, and anytime your better half or your friends are all in the game business, or even the survivor pools, and that's what those survivor pools and contests. One thing I always tell clients: even if you're not a bettor, get into a contest, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, what do people want? They just want action. And if that's a single bet or in a contest will give you that action every Sunday, and it'll keep you involved into the game.
Yeah, and you're only investing once. Right. Yeah. As opposed to every week or every day. And yeah, you're right, Ron. I remember when I first started out, I would tell people when they asked me what I did, and I would tell them, and they would frown and go, "Oh, you're a bookie." No,
Yeah, exactly.
on the opposite end of the spectrum. So, yeah, it took, and to this day, I have some friends that just can't believe that I make a full-time living out of this. They can't wrap their head around it, and they don't understand. It's just not about picking games. It's writing articles. It's doing videos. If the days of handicapper being successful online, just selling picks online, there's very few that can make a living doing that, and
Yeah.
most that do have been around since 1990 or so. So, yeah, it's an evolving business, and it's nice when you start to become accepted in the public eye. Correct?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, you're seeing a shift in say advertising and the offshore world. Now they're known as global sports books.
yeah,
It's hey, it's a totally different industry right now. It's fun, it's exciting. I call it the Klondike right now because everybody's trying to get in. When we've been in for like 20 some years, but it's good when I talking to Jim Quinn last week, OGA, and we just reminisce about the good old days. And I love talking to guys who've been around because to me, these guys are the pioneers, and that they should be recognized of the
sure.
guys who started online handicapping. The Mark Lawrences, Brian Giorgio, who was with Bettor's World. There was the Prescription, Major Wager, Mad Jacks. All these guys, to me, these are the pioneers. And anybody who's in the online sports handicapping world now, you can thank those type of guys that started this industry to where we are today. Because without those guys laying the groundwork at the beginning, we don't know what this industry looks like today.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of quality back then, and there was also a lot of bad people back then.
Yeah.
But the volume isn't what it is now. And right now, again, without putting a negative spin on it, everybody who wins a couple weeks in a row decides they're going to call themselves a professional and try to sell online, and then realizes making a profit over the long haul isn't quite as easy as having a couple hot weeks, right, Ron? And they also realize the work that needs to go in. So you got to be real careful, folks. There's a lot of new people out there. So I'm not saying all of them are bad, and I'm not saying some of them aren't great handicappers. It's just you really have to do your homework. And as opposed to back in the 90s when there was some bad people and that are still around to this day that are nothing more than phone touts using the sports handicapping industry as a vehicle to milk you out of money. Back then, you had no resource to check on the credibility of that particular individual. Now you have the internet at your disposal. Shame on you if you make mistakes and you don't research who you are dealing with. So I would highly advise folks, before you start sending money to anybody or buying from anybody, make sure you do your homework. Because if you do a Google search, for example, on Ross Benjamin Sports or even on Ron Raymond, you're going to find several pages of information there. That's not a fluke. And I'm not trying to put a star on my forehead or Ron's, but it's the reality of the situation. So hopefully they do their homework, Ron.
And to the young, one thing I do, and I sometimes I look around and see what the industry looks like. One thing I do appreciate is when people put in the time and the hard work into the industry, and those guys I got time for. Those guys, you can tell by their website, their work ethic, and what kind, if they're polite. I got time for those guys. But guys, like you said, who just fly by night and just looking for the quick buck, those are the guys you got to watch out for, right?
Yep.
All right, buddy. Hey, you know what? Let's take a look at the SBI. As I was telling Ross, we're continuing improving here at ATSStats.com. I'm going to do a screen share. Let's look at how the NFL did. Actually, we'll go in college football, and then I'll bring up the NFL, what the SBI did this weekend. And I'm going to do a screen share because I know that's the first thing that I'm sharp on a Tuesday morning here. There you go. All right. You see that, Ross?
Yes, I do.
Okay, perfect. So we're week 10. Hey, do you believe that? Week 10 of college football. And it's been a weird, obviously we know it's been a weird season. Good news yesterday that there is a vaccine that has 90% efficiency. So hopefully that works out where, we get some sort of normalcy back.
Yeah.
But what is normal is some of these games in college football. It's just you got to wait till Friday almost to lay your bet. And I know it probably works against you and sometimes with the number, but I think it works both ways. Now, looking at the number, Ross, just straight up, 72% of the favorites won in week 10. 27% on the dogs. And that's normal, right? When you got under favorites of 20 points, 30 points, 14 points, 2 touchdowns, you're going to see that number. And if you look at the average on the year, 76.2. So believe it or not, week 10 was below average for the favorites to win, right?
Yeah, you don't see the parity in college football as in the NFL for obvious reasons. There's more teams. So anyway, go ahead, Ron.
And the thing is, you now looking at the totals, and this is where I look for. I look for yellow, because when I see yellow, I feel we're in a good market where you could probably, be in a good situation handicapping wise if you do your homework. And look at that, 52.2% of the overs came in last week. In fact, the overs, just like in every other sport, man, it's really crazy how the overs are coming in every level of college football, NFL, baseball. I'd have to go back to hockey, but isn't it amazing? I wonder if it has anything to do with the COVID situation on the way people are practicing during the week. They're not getting the fundamentals of the contact drills in. There's something there, I think.
Yeah, couple things, Ron. I mean, I've mentioned this from the get-go before the season started, and in a few weeks into the season when we saw an influx of overs, is that there was no preseason in the NFL. There was pretty much no spring practices in college football. So you're right. The fundamentals of just tackling in general is I think a big contributing factor. And then you're playing in virtually empty stadiums in most cases, very little crowd in other cases. So you're able, as a visiting team, to audible at the line and communicate a lot better than you used to do. And that goes hand in hand with the dogs. There is Rusty barking in the background. So anyway, I think that's the contributing factors, Ron.
Yeah, had somebody drop a parcel at the door, so that's why you got the Rusty, the underdog.
Rusty makes an appearance every show.
You know what? Rusty's probably more popular than we are on this show right now.
Yeah.
But
especially
you're right.
After we have a bad week once in a while.
But you're not going to top me this week. I'll tell you that. I'm too high on a cloud right now. Hey,
I know. There you go, buddy.
Yeah.
You deserve to be.
Thanks, buddy. Now, you know what? Yes, you're right. The fundamentals of hitting and everything. But here's the thing, and I always remember listening to that the conference there at the beginning of the year. There was a virtual contest, a conference where sports betting industry and when their bookmakers were talking. And I always remember what I think it was Carnegie was saying. He goes, "This is going to be a lot of sleepless nights for bookmakers trying to get that number right." Because with COVID, and he goes, do we put the number out too early, too late? And these guys, they knew this was going to be an issue all year, but I don't think they thought it would be totals. They probably thought it'd be like the side, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think a lot of bookmakers foresaw these kind of overs happening, and for what reasons. It's always hindsight's always 2020. When we look at the inordinate amount of overs that have come in compared to unders, and we could discern why that's occurred. Okay. But the bookmakers don't have that luxury. They have to adjust as they go. Having said that, a perfect example of what you're talking about, Ron, is the LSU and Alabama game this week. LSU opened as a 24-point home underdog. They're now up to 28. And I just read yesterday, you have to have a minimum of, I believe, 52 players in college football under scholarship that are active roster going into that game. In other words, via injuries and via these COVID situations, scholarship, you have to have 52 scholarship players available for the upcoming game. And LSU is in jeopardy of having to cancel the game.
Wow.
because of injuries in the COVID situation. So this is 2020, okay? In a nutshell, you have the defending national champion from the year before now in a situation where they may not have enough scholarship players to participate in a game because of COVID and because of the injuries that that have occurred on their roster, more so because of COVID. You got guys who test positive for COVID. Not only that, Ron, now you go into the tracing protocol, and guys that may not have tested positive but have to be kept in isolation because they were in contact with players that have tested positive. It's a mess. But
Yeah.
I mean, it goes hand in hand on what you're just saying, buddy.
Yeah. And what's that line now? 20 was 20
It
something?
was, I know it was 28 last night. I didn't check this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because I heard this morning that line in June was -2.5 for Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Now
Yeah.
look, at LSU is obviously not even when healthy is not nowhere near the team. I mean, they've given up 45 points or more in 3 of their 5 games this year, I think. And that's not LSU football.
No.
And this is definitely not the same team again when 100% healthy is they not even close to what they were a season ago. Starting at quarterback, you lose Joe Burrow, and all the players who were drafted and are now playing on Sunday this year. But to see that kind of line movement, anticipate, it just shows you what we're dealing with in 2020, not only in the world in general, but in our little cocoon of sports gambling.
Yeah. Looking at the underdogs this weekend, Ross, 55.3% of the underdogs cashed in this weekend. And you know what? With the Pac-10 now joining the party, people don't really have a clue what that was going to be turning out. Like week 1 is a free for all for everybody, right? Everybody comes in blind. But 38.3% of the favorites have cashed this weekend. So that grabbed my attention. Of the first 10 weeks, it's only been an underdog week three times out of 10, and it's 7 according to our Raymond Report law of average theory here, 42.8 to 57.1% of the neutrals. So you can see right here, 55.8 to 41.9, the favorites won that week, and it's just small margins. So when I do, and I look at, the Raymond Report looks at like the stock market, so I need a certain number to really say, okay, this is a bear market, this is a bull market. Yeah. So we've been pretty good. The bookmakers done a pretty good job with the balance, 70% of balance so far. But just 3 weeks of the underdogs have really, took them to the woodshed type thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, and kudos to them, just based on what we just discussed. You know what I mean? The difficulty of dealing with these COVID situations. So,
yeah. So let's take a look at the NFL. The NFL this week, I think it was another pretty even week, actually. Looking at the favorites, 71.4%, which is a tad. Well, you know what? This reminds me of baseball season. You've heard me say this in the baseball season. Games after the All-Star breaks, for some reason, favorites tend to win more. I don't know what the reason is. It's just that the good teams get better and the bad teams get worse type thing. But 71.4% of the favorites won straight up compared to 64.5% on the season. So only a couple of times we've seen, like this is week 2, 87.5%. That's crazy. So straight up, if you're in those survivor pools or just a pool without the spread and you're taking favorites, you're doing pretty good according to this here, 71.4%. Looking at the totals, Ross, 64.3% again of the overs. We are in an over market. Wow, look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the last 9 weeks have gone over the total. We've only been in a bull market for the unders 1 week, meaning we've been a bear market for the overs. In week 6, only 33.3% of the overs cashed, but 66.7% of the unders. So, Ross, man, I'm going to say, like I said in baseball, keep your foot on the pedal because I don't see anything changing.
I did a little bit of research yesterday again, and we've had 51 games through 9 weeks of the NFL season that have had a total of 50 or greater. It's unprecedented. That exceeds any number of any season prior to this. and we've only been through 9 weeks of the season. And I was trying to profess earlier, watch out, you're going to get some unders where you see games land in the 50s and still go under. Well, it happened for a week or two. I mean, going back to week 6 and week 5, it started to turn to week 7. But then again, we're looking at the last 2 weeks, and it's turned around once again, Ron. So now players are getting worn down, and key injuries on the defensive side of the ball. And the other point I wanted to make, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself here, but we're looking at the underdogs this year at 54.5% for the year. The last 2 weeks, the underdogs have made a killing, as you can see, 57.1% in week 9, 71.4% in week 8. And, Ron, I looked at this earlier, and if you could do this for me and you could accommodate this for me, I would ask you to look at the away underdogs this year within the database. And you're going to see a big disparity between away underdogs and home underdogs. The away underdogs are cashing in at a very high rate this year. And then also want to bring to the listeners and viewers' attention, I had the Jets at +10 yesterday, a winner. Dallas, I mentioned on Friday's show that watch out because, these underdogs of between 10 and 14 at home are cashing at a big rate. Well, home underdogs of 10 or greater this year, Ron, have gone 4-0-1 thus far. That's in, what are we looking at here? 47-33-1 on away underdogs, which is
I'm bringing up this friggin'
my database shows 50-35. And again, we're going to always be within the ballpark, but it's just a matter of what we use for a closing line. I always use the closing line. The computer might be grading this on the opening line. But in any event, look at those numbers, 47-33 against the spread.
59%.
Yeah, 59%. And if you go to home underdogs, you're going to find it's more of a level playing field. 25-24-2. And now if you take a look at home underdogs of 10 or greater this year, I have 4-0-1. I'm not sure what the computer would have here. On your database, they got 3-1. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I don't have a loser, but in any event, again, the computer is recognizing the opening line. I'm grading them on the closing line. The point being is, and look at that, home underdogs of 10 or greater. It's been really good. Okay, so which tells me home underdogs of 9.5 or less have not done very well. But keep an eye on that. Away underdogs have really cashed in a high rate this year. And in my opinion, that's got to even off and level off down the stretch, Ron. But it's just a weird year, so I don't know.
Hey, I thought the overs would stop cashing in baseball.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I know.
It's like, like my buddy would say, D's for drive, keep driving.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's like you said, it's one of those years. Try to be a bookmaker in this era right now of trying to adjust your numbers. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because what kills the books is the favorites, and right now they're not getting killed by the favorites. The underdogs, if they can get more dog weeks.
Yeah, I mean they're probably doing well. If the underdogs are cashing in, the books are doing good because the majority of public betting is guys who are chalk players. And I don't mean to make any disrespect to the general public out there, but the bottom line, they have a short memory. They look at if team A beat team B and team B beat team C, then team A should beat team C. Or they look at what happened the week before and they overreact, not accounting for anything else but the results from the week before. So
I listen to a lot of sports books on the radio and I see online, and I don't hear many of them crying. So I think they're doing okay.
Yeah.
And they look well fed too. Little shot to the bookmaker for the.
Boy, you're really going a long way in solidifying your relationship with the offshore community.
Yeah. Who's that offshore?
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, Ross. Hey, you know what? We got 3 college football games tonight. But it's not out of the ordinary. We've seen the MAC play these Tuesday, Wednesday games the last couple of years. Now, I'm going to bring up a couple of games. Let's go to Akron, Ohio, and I'll just give what the computer of the Raymond Report has. Akron taking on the Bobcats today, a 28-point favorite. The over-under at 58.5. Now, I did this morning, so the line could change out there. So when I'll do a cross-reference on what I have right now, and I'm seeing the same thing, 27.5 at some places. Yep. The forecast does like the Bobcats here tonight, Ross, 40.7 to 22.48. The over-under at 63.2, so it does like it to go over the total. And both these teams only played 1 game so far. They're both 0-1. 0-1 against the spread, and the game went over for both of them. According to the Rain Report, chance of winning tonight, 74% for the Bobcats, 19.5 for the Zips. And I think you mentioned last week, Akron was just not having
it's horrible. Good. I mean, they were 0-12 straight up in ATS last year. Think about that. Not only did they go winless, they didn't cover any of those games. And, as the season progressed, they were big underdogs, and they still couldn't cover. And they didn't cover in week 1. They got beat at home, I think 55-13 last week, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in that area. Ohio off a tough loss in week 1. Frank Solich has really done a great job at Ohio. Again, you're asked to cover a premium price, but you're asked to cover a premium price of -28 against a team that can't get out of their own way, and it's been absolutely awful, Ron. What was their week 1 result? I think they lost at home 55-13. Do you have their past?
Yeah, 58-13.
58-13 to Western Michigan. And then Ohio loses that heartbreaker against Central Michigan 30-27. You might say, okay, well, you know what? 28's a lot of points. Sooner or later, going to cover a game. I would have probably contemplated using that at 28, if not for the fact I would have liked it more if Ohio was coming off a win instead of a loss, Ron. They're going to be in an ornery mood after losing that game last week.
And looking at the last 10 overall games, Ohio 9-1 straight up, 5-5 against the spread, 4-6 to the under. We got a good morning here, Ross, from our friend Eric Catherine. Good morning, Eric. And Jared Schrader says, bet Miami +10 this morning. So right on. Yeah, that number's going down, right? I thought saw Miami. I know we'll get to that game in a second, Jared, but I thought that number at 9.5 now, I think. And it might go down a bit more. Let me see here at 9.5. So if you got it at 10, that's good. All right, let's take a look at the other game, Ross. We got Kent State taking on Bowling Green. The Falcons of Bowling Green taking on the Golden Flashes. Now looking at the line this game, -21 for Kent State. The over-under set at 55.5. Forecast going to call for a Kent State victory here, 33.7 to 11.4. Don't see many 11 here unless it's the CFL. But, 45.1 is the total according to the Rain Report. And looking at both teams, Kent State 1-0, coming off a win last week against Eastern Michigan, 23-27, where Bowling Green lost to Toledo, 38-3. And looking at the VI. Now, the VI here stands for the value index, the Vegas index, and this is what our line, but again, it only works when there's a minimum of 3 games in the system, so we're going to pass on that right now. Looking at the last 10 overall games here, Ross, or let's go since 96, 7-4 straight up, 3-8 against the spread. So Bowling Green doesn't have a great spread record against Kent State right here. And I just wanted to get that out there. Any of your thoughts on this game tonight?
Yeah, I mean, 2 programs headed in opposite directions. Kent State off a real good year by their standards because they had a lot of failures prior to that. And then they opened with the win, I believe. Kent State, yes, beat Eastern Michigan 27-23. Bowling Green gets crushed at Toledo. Bowling Green, since Dino Babers left for Syracuse, has been on a steady decline. And this is a team that's going to be hard-pressed to win a game this year in the MAC. So unless they play Akron, of course. But yeah, it's a game I'm personally going to stay away from. But as my observations are quite simple, Kent State on the rise, Bowling Green in a steep decline.
Yeah, I didn't know that Babers was at Bowling Green before.
Yeah,
Syracuse.
he was a head coach at Bowling Green, and then he got the job at Syracuse. He had a
Awesome.
lot of success at Bowling Green.
Alval 24 says I'm stuck on the Kent State. So I guess he's on the fence. I like Bowling Green plus the point, says Comic Kiss. Alval says maybe the under, and then Jared says under in the Kent State game looks like a potential play for him. So that's hey, thanks for the feedback, guys. You know what? Anytime we get the feedback, we'll bring it on air. And Ross is the college guy here, and maybe he might have
I don't disagree with those gentlemen. I mean, I'm not going to make a play on that game, but their logic is sound.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a quick look here on. Sometimes we do have some check marks that make sense, but again, during a COVID situation, and the MAC only got going 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so since '96, 8-3. 13-3. So teams that are on the road facing Bowling Green, they're 13-3 against the spread. So that's that doesn't bode well.
Yeah, but most of those situations, Bowling Green was prior to this. Actually, well, how long does that go back, Ron? I'm sorry,
96. Last 3 years. So sorry, last 3 years.
Yeah. Right, so yeah, there's a lot of situations they were a favorite, not an underdog. In those situations, 13-3 against the spread. What's their straight up record?
I don't have that. I'd have to look it up.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. Tough call for me. I'm not going to ask a bad team to do good things for me. And Bowling Green's a bad team, Ron.
Yeah, they are. All right, let's take a look at the other. I'll just take a look at some of the guys here, what they're saying. So under State game. So Eric likes the under. So all right.
I can't disagree with that based on Bowling Green's offensive output last week, which is pretty much nothing. They did kick a field goal, and that's against a Toledo team that's traditionally very good offensively, but very suspect defensively. So we'll see what happens. So
it looks like the game of the night will be in Buffalo, Ross, not the Bills, but the Bulls. This line now is -9.5. And the over-under at 54.5. I'm just going to take a quick peek to see if it's 56.5 now, I see, and 57 at some places. So looks like money's coming in on the over in this game here this evening. Public driving that number up. According to the Raymond Report computer pick, it does like the Bulls by 4 here. 24.2 to 20.6. The over-under at 44.8. So the computer going against public sentiment here. And both teams coming off a win last week. You saw here last game, Buffalo beat Northern Illinois 49-30. So, when I see teams put on 49, but they give up 30, that worries me a bit.
And they scored 49. And if I'm not mistaken, they had, I believe, 3 defensive touchdowns in that game, all in the same quarter, in the third quarter. If not 3, they had 2, and the other one set up a very short field. If you look at the total yards in that game, Ron, they were pretty even. Okay. So, yes, even more concerning is the fact that 49 that they put up is deceiving. Buffalo, on the other hand, does have an extremely good rushing attack. Their top 2 running backs may be playing on Sundays in the future, or they at least have a shot to. And Miami of Ohio, this looks like a game that's going to go down to the wire for me. And I know that somebody else, one of the listeners or viewers, said they liked Miami, and I could see why.
Yeah. Eric is saying tonight in that game in Kent State, the win will be at 18-25 crosswind. One thing I do feel for those the MAC players is when you watch those Tuesday games in November, it looks like Santa Claus is going to start crossing the field there. It looks so cold there.
And in the MAC's defense, these Tuesday and Wednesday games that they've opted in to play, they're getting national TV exposure that they ordinarily wouldn't. So they're the only league on the board, and it's a hell of a recruiting tool, Ron. Yeah, I know you could relate to that.
Yeah. Look at this. Miami, Ohio, on 5 days rest when they're playing, on 5 days rest on the road, 6-1 against the spread. So, they're kind of used to playing on short notice, right? Yeah. So
the whole league is.
Yeah, the whole league. Yeah, good point. The whole league is so, but not for Buffalo here. 2-5 against the number on 5 days rest. So 9-1-1 coming off a win, and I don't know if that's since '96 or last 3 years. I'd have to double check. It says since '96 here, but I'm wondering if it's yeah. Wow, 9-1-1 coming off a win. I'll double check that
Yeah, that's not right. That's not right. I mean, they've won. They won
at
a lot
home
of games.
when they're at home.
Oh, at home. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when they're at home.
Yeah, I still don't think that's right.
So
That's
here,
got to be last 3 seasons, Ron.
okay,
But
you know what?
again, I might be incorrect.
Yeah, let me just check my see the one thing here I'll bring this over. So Buffalo at home coming off a win. Not a loss. Oops.
And if it is since '96 and not the last 3 years, I'm going to be a bit surprised.
Let me see here. So we're gonna go. See the one thing with a database. Oh, there it is. I saw it right there. Boom. And let's go last 3 years. The one thing with database, I kept adding criterias. So look at this. Yeah, 9-1.
Yeah, the last 3 years.
Last 3 years. So not 96.
Yep.
Yeah. So since last 3 years, 9-1, 8-2-1. I guess there was that's a wrong one right there. 8-3 to the over. So pretty good, man. Some conflicting numbers there for some of our viewers here who like Buffalo. Alva, he likes Miami +10, but that's a pretty strong. So Eric says I also got Miami +10, and Eric goes that Rutgers game +38 paid off big. Also, the Raymond Report. Right on.
Ohio State never was close to covering that game. I mean, Rutgers was inside the number throughout, and that was a real good call.
Yeah, we had some really good college football games this weekend, Ross? Like that Clemson Notre Dame game. That's probably the game of the year when you look at it from an entertainment point of view. Man, it's just sometimes you watch a game, it's like, why do you even play 58 minutes? Just go right to overtime or go to the last minute. It's
but a lot of times these games that are hyped, like Clemson, Notre Dame, number 1 versus number 4 in the regular season, don't live up to expectations, but that one certainly did. And I said before that when we talked about that game last week, Ron, I said Ian Book is going to have to show me he could throw for 250 to 300 yards against a good defense like Clemson, a great defense actually. And he did, and he surprised me. I mean, he showed me a lot in that game. The kid, he's accurate with his passing. He keeps plays alive with his legs. He could scramble and run to move the chains on third down. So really impressive performance by Ian Book. And for those who want to say that Trevor Lawrence didn't play and that's the big difference, okay. But keep this in mind, that true freshman quarterback for Clemson threw for 460 yards. I don't know how much better Trevor Lawrence could have done in that game than he did.
The defense didn't for Clemson, the defense for some reason has been suspect all year. But a program like Alabama, Clemson, LSU, they're good. They lose great players to the NFL, and then they're rebuilding. And hey, it's just going to happen. But the thing is, with those top programs, they probably have a shortfall in the defense, but they'll have a great offense, and that's what's happening with Clemson right now. They got the tools. They just they don't have the guys on defense like they had last year, and vice versa for other teams, right? And it's almost like a rotation.
Here's irony, Ron. We're going to talk about Notre Dame and Boston College on our Thursday college football show, but the last time that Notre Dame hosted a number 1 team in the country was in the early 90s. I think it's 92. Lou Holtz was then the head coach of Notre Dame. They hosted Florida State, who at that particular moment in time was number 1. The coach at that time for Florida State was legendary Bobby Bowden. And Notre Dame knocked off the number 1 team in the country, Florida State, on that Saturday afternoon. The following week, the Irish faced Boston College, and as a double-digit underdog, and then being rated number 1 after that win against Florida State, were upset by Boston College. Notre Dame beats Clemson last week at home, hosting a number 1 team since for the first time since that Florida State game in the early 90s. And who do they have up next? Boston College. Talk about irony, huh, Ron?
Oh, buddy. You know what? This reminds me of a pick we both had this week with Iowa, right? Michigan State, beats Michigan in the Big House. And last week, it's just for some reason in college football, it's as if the victory lasts 2 weeks and they don't realize they're playing in 7 days, right?
Yeah.
And sure enough, me and you were both on that Iowa play. Just taking a quick look here. Let me know if anything stands out to you in some of these games. Miami, North Carolina, good comeback by the Canes there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in North Carolina State, to me, they're a dangerous home underdog this week, in my opinion. Talk about BYU.
Yeah.
I mean, they really proved something. Look at Boise State was without their starting quarterback. Their second string quarterback gets hurt in the first quarter of that game and goes out. But all due respect, BYU just played a phenomenal game. They're physical. That quarterback, Zach Wilson, is a number one draft choice. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to watch him play, Ron. Terrific arm, a lot of savvy, a lot of confidence, a true leader, a guy to keep an eye on going forward, Ron.
And you know what, Ross? We all know Boise is not an easy place to go get a win, and they destroyed them. Like, it wasn't like 24-17. It was 51-17. That's not even,
it might not even the final score might not even be indicative of how much BYU really dominated that game.
Yeah. Texas got another win over West Virginia. Iowa, we talked about it. They got that W against Michigan State. That was from, like they say in horse racing, that was from wire to gate right there.
Yeah. West Virginia continues to be a good underdog play, Ron. Their defense is for Big 12 standards. Their defense is superb. So keep an eye on them going forward if you can catch them in a home underdog role, because their defense will keep them in a lot of games, Ron.
Yeah. We talked about Arkansas State all year with that stud receiver they have there, number 9.
Yeah.
27-20 against the Raging Cajun as a 14.5 point favorite. So Arkansas State has been a good bettor's good friend. SMU, Temple, Nebraska. You know what? This was my 5-star best bet. It could have went either way here. I got lucky. I'm not going to hide it. Northwestern, 3-0 now in the season. Nebraska, Martinez, he's inconsistent. He's a bit like Cam Newton in some respect. He's not, but that McCaffrey.
Well, when you looked at his performance in his freshman year, Ron, he hasn't seemed to progress at all since then. You know, you would have thought by now this kid would be a difference maker, but he's been anything but. Northwestern, most underrated head coach in college football, in my estimation, Pat Fitzgerald from Northwestern.
Yeah, I agree.
He's under tough. That's a high academic institution where it's a lot tougher to recruit there than anywhere else in the Big Ten.
Oh, so it's a similar like Vanderbilt type thing, right?
Yes, exactly. Great analogy.
Okay. So Jared is saying trap spot for Indiana this weekend against MSU. Indiana might be looking ahead to OSU, Ohio State. Yeah, you know what? Good point.
Well, not only that, let's stop and think about this. Indiana knocks off Michigan at home last week and broke a 24-game losing streak against the Wolverines. Okay. Now they're going on the road this week at Michigan State as a road favorite. And as the viewer just brought up, Ohio State on deck. The only thing I will say about that Ohio State game, it's not going to be played the following week. It's going to be played in 2 weeks. But look, you can't help but think Indiana, there's no way that they're going to be as mentally stoked as they were last week against Michigan at home. And now they're playing a Michigan State team this week that was just absolutely lambasted at Iowa, 49-7, as Ron just touched upon. So very good observation by the viewer.
Yeah, Jared, thanks for that. North Carolina destroyed Duke 56-24. One thing with North Carolina, they have these big games, but I don't see a lot of consistency how they follow it up in the previous week, right? So I know they're playing Wake Forest, I think, this week. I'm not sure. I thought I saw Wake Forest, and that's
it is Wake Forest, and they're, I think, somewhere around a 10-point favorite in that game.
Yeah.
I think that's a dangerous spot for North Carolina. Wake Forest has been sneakily good
Yeah,
this year.
no, you're right. Hey, speaking of sneaky good, Ross, the Liberty Flames. We
Yeah.
talked about. I know, unfortunately, it was Virginia Tech was one of your top play, or I don't know if it was a top play, but it was a play.
Yeah, it was a 5-star play. It wasn't my top play, but hey, give credit to Liberty. They went in there and they racked up close to 500 yards of total offense. And I had my doubts about Liberty only because they were 6-0 going into that game, Ron, and one of their wins was against an FCS opponent, and the 5 wins against FBS opponents, those teams had a combined record of 4-26. So I'm saying, well, we got an unranked team as a double-digit home favorite against a ranked team. It smelled like a rat to me, but boy, was I wrong in that particular instance. And again, Virginia Tech this week, a 2.5-point home favorite as an unranked team against a ranked team again. So something to keep an eye on. We'll talk about that game on Thursday.
Yeah, they're playing Miami, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay. South Florida, Memphis. That was a close one here as an 18-point favorite, 34-33. Troy lost to Georgia Southern. Man, that's a Sun Belt team, right? Georgia Southern.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
both Sun Belt. Yeah.
The Fun Belt. They call it the Fun Belt.
Georgia Southern, a team that runs a triple option, and pretty similar to the service academies, how they run their offense, Ron.
Okay, yeah, those are tough teams to prepare for because it throws your whole the scout team way out of whack. Now you got to bring in tacklers, and it's assignment football, and you really had a lot of classroom because you got to explain to the players the read options and all those other things that they got to key on, right?
Especially if they get the lead on you, they're very tough, and especially if you only have 1 week to prepare for them. And like in most instances would be the case. It's one thing if you're playing them in your season opener where you have an entire off season to work on it. But as you well know, Ron, as you just touched upon, pretty tough task to prepare a team to play a triple option team with 1 week to prepare.
Here's a funny situation, Ross. Boston College, almost pulled the upset against Clemson and then go to Syracuse and win as a 14.5-point favorite. So, normally we talk about hangovers after a win. This is like a hangover after a loss.
Well, I mean, they played Clemson the week before and they had Notre Dame on deck. That was a perfect flat spot. If you're really looking, hindsight's always 20/20. But if you think about it, Ron, you almost knocked off the number 1 team in the country on the road, and then you're hosting Notre Dame the following week, who was number 4 at the time. They didn't know what Notre Dame would be winner over Clemson, but against a Syracuse team that's just awful. It looked like a proverbial flat spot, and shame on me for not taking Syracuse in that game.
Looking at Marshall, that quarterback Wells, I think his name is. Really good quarterback. I didn't see the stats.
Freshman,
still winning, right? Look at that, 44.5-point favorite.
Boy, oh boy, look at Marshall's defensive statistics, folks. One of the best in the country. I know they haven't played much of anybody, but they're only allowing like 9 points a game in the low 200s in total yards per contest. So, the true freshman has been very good, but it helps to have a defense that's that stout.
App State beat Texas State here, 38-17, 21-point favorite. Texas Tech and TCU. I'm trying to bring up TCU's record because there's one thing with the Big 12 I'm noticing is Texas Longhorn, Oklahoma, TCU. Those are teams that have pretty good, okay, TCU's not in the same bracket as Oklahoma, but they started slow out of the gate and they're starting to get these wins together. That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, and the only thing about TCU is they've been inconsistent this year. They knock off Texas on the road. They come home to play Kansas State against a true freshman quarterback, and they get blown out at home. And then they turn around, with a performance like they had last week. So very hard team for me to gauge at this particular moment in time, Ron.
Yeah, 3-3 on the season, and that's where I was going with that. Looking at the first game of the year, they lose to Ohio State 37-34, 33-31 to Texas. They beat them. They lost
to who in the opening game? I'm sorry.
Iowa State.
Iowa State, correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Texas Tech, they dismantled, well, not dismantled, 34-18 and 33-23 to Baylor. So, it'll be interesting to see how they progress from here on 3-3 on the
Texas
year.
Tech is really on a spiraling downward right now. That program there, ever since Mike Leach has left, hasn't been Cliff Kingsbury somehow got an NFL job with a losing record at Texas Tech, but they had two pretty good offensive minds there prior to this current regime, and we're seeing them not being as competitive as they normally are in the Big 12.
Yeah. Look at this. Oklahoma State taking on Kansas State last weekend. What a close game. And you know what? Oklahoma State was a 14-point favorite in that game. They go to Kansas State, who lost the week before to West Virginia, and almost, hey, look at this, 20-18.
Doesn't shock me. Kansas State at home, and then you gave them 14 points. It opened at 12. They're going to play everybody tough at home, Kansas State, regardless of who the quarterback is.
Yeah, Oklahoma Sooners destroyed Kansas. Man, Les Miles not having much fun down there, right?
He's eating a lot of grass. That's a bit about it.
Hey, the game this was a great game. Florida Gators, Georgia Bulldogs. It was going to be Florida's offense against Georgia's defense. And wow,
Kyle, they just trashed them. Kyle Trask is another number one draft choice waiting to happen. Ron, this kid's a walk-on too. He started out when he came in his freshman year as the fifth string quarterback. Just goes to show you what perseverance, where it can take you. And here's the thing with Georgia. You look at their defensive numbers, Ron, terrific. But against the two teams that were ranked that they played, Florida and Alabama, they got lambasted as far as their defensive performance goes. I think both teams had well over 500 yards of total offense against that Georgia defense.
We have a question here, Ross. It's a new listener, and his name is Sippy Sports Show. So thanks for the question, Sippy. He says, thoughts on Southern Miss versus Western Kentucky. Also, who should be the Southern Miss head coach? So I guess he's probably from Southern Miss, and he's not happy with.
He's from Hattiesburg, the Hattiesburg area in Mississippi. Western Kentucky, Southern Miss. Something's got to give there because both teams are struggling. If I had any kind of lean in that game, I'd go toward the under because neither team is really good offensively. And as far as the next Southern Miss coach goes, that's a good question. Okay, they fired their head coach after game one of the season, which is pretty much unprecedented, unless there's some kind of internal problem.
Not much patience there.
Yeah, well, there had, like you said at that time when we discussed that, you said, Ross, there had to be something more than just that loss, or what's been going on in the program over the last 2 years. So that seemed to me to be a building situation. I wouldn't be shocked if they go to the FCS level, Southern Miss, and grab somebody who's had a lot of success at the FCS level. I think that would be more of a good option because you grab somebody at the FCS level and not somebody who's been at a Power 5 school that's just going to use that program as a stepping stone. You get an FCS type coach like you have at Wyoming, you have at Kansas State right now that both came from North Dakota State. And there'll be more tend to build the program and stick around for a while. So that's the direction I'm looking. If I could take a wild stab at it, and I have no inside information to back that claim, but that's just my educated guess.
Yeah, and you know what? We're seeing a lot of ex-players come into the coaching ranks. We saw Deion Sanders going now to Jackson State. Would a Brett Favre be, Southern Miss graduate? Would he be somebody who'd be like considered not a head coach, but maybe you bring in the program that to bring some energy back?
Maybe as a consultant, Ron, but you're not going to get Brett Favre to come out of retirement after making mass $1 million in his career, regardless of it being his alma mater. Brett Favre, I just don't see as coaching material. Period.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, people are going to go to Jackson State because Deion is there.
Well, yeah, I get that. Okay. But Dion must have had a high aspiration to coach, and nobody in the Power Five school or Power Five conferences were going to grab him. He didn't want to go to a small. So the only one who's going to give him an opportunity like that is a school like Jackson State. And believe me, Ron, you can't help but think nothing against Deion Sanders. He might end up being a great college head coach, but you can't tell me that the majority of that decision wasn't based on publicity, recruiting, and putting fans in the stands. It's more of a publicity ploy than anything else. Now, if Deion Sanders proves me wrong, he already grabbed his son to come there already. I believe who was a highly touted quarterback. They had offers from Power Five schools, but again,
here's to that point. Like I've seen Dion at camps. Like he's very involved in football camps, and I've got friends who've met him, and they said that he's so hands-on when he goes to camp. It's in his blood, and he's got that charisma, that energy, that the law of attraction. And Brett Favre, I'm sure, like, I don't know what it is, like you see him at his high schools, doing his workouts and all that, but I wonder how involved he is in camps, and being the alma mater at Southern Miss, he might be somebody that to drive in recruits, because recruiting is a game in itself, and you got to be a good recruiter. And you're seeing a lot of coaches now. Look at the Liberty coach. Will you freeze his name?
Yes.
Yeah. He says, okay, go to. There's so much pressure in going to a top school, because you got to win. And when you go to these lower schools, maybe you don't want that pressure. Now, Sippy's saying, okay, he goes Derek Nix from Ole Miss as the head coach and Austin Davis as the OC. Or just give me Miami OC.
Austin Davis, he's a former Southern Miss quarterback. So yeah.
Or there he goes. Or he goes, give me the OC at Miami, who just got there, right? Rhett Lashley, and he'd make it down. Yeah, but you know what? The guys like Lashley, they got to prove themselves first, right? You can't give him a head coach job after 4 games, 5 games.
And let's not forget, Hugh Freeze got fired at Ole Miss not because he didn't have success, Ron. Okay. It's because there was recruiting violations. That caused a lot of inner turmoil within the program. They were actually suspended from bowl game eligibility one year. So when he was at Ole Miss, he was one of the best recruiters in the country. And I would be shocked. I would be absolutely shocked, based on what Liberty's done just in the 2 years he's been there, specifically this year, if he's there next year. Okay. Somebody in a major program is going to go after him.
Well, it's a carousel every year, right? There's the teams that want to win, programs that want to win, but it's such. Ask Jim Harbaugh. Ask Jim Harbaugh how much fun he's having at Michigan.
But that's the point I'm trying to make with the Southern Miss job. You could bring in a Hugh Freeze, but Liberty knew that they're in a whole different situation. Liberty had just started at the FBS level a few years ago. So getting a guy like Hugh Freeze, they're thinking, you know what, worst case scenario, 2 years he's gone because we're having a lot of success, and he's upped our brand name, and he's brought in some terrific recruits because he's one of the best recruits in the country. Southern Miss isn't in that position. They're an established program. And you don't want to grab a Hugh Freeze type that's just going to be there for a year or two and then take off.
Yeah.
Okay. You want somebody who's going to solidify that program and have a sense of stability, and know that if he does have success, he's going to ride it out for 5 or 6 years minimum.
Like a Fitzgerald at Northwestern, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Maryland, man, Penn State, 0-2.
Yeah.
Lose Indiana in game 1, a heartbreaker. Not even close last week against Maryland, as a 27-point home favorite, Ross.
Yeah.
Man, where do we start here?
Yeah. We start with Maryland. They've now won back-to-back games as double-digit underdogs.
Wow.
The week before, they were a 17-point underdog. Who the heck did they play the week before? Look, if you could look inside that game, Ron, and see who they played the week
Maryland?
before. Yes, they beat somebody as a 17-point underdog the week before.
Are they playing this week?
Yes, they're
Okay.
playing Ohio State, actually.
Okay, here it is. Yeah, there's a. All right, so here you go.
Yeah, Maryland. Uh, Look at, they
Minnesota.
beat Minnesota at home as a 17-point underdog. You got them at 19, 18. I can't read that. I
Yeah.
think it says 18 or 19. 17, 18, 19. What's the difference? It's a double-digit dog. And then winning last week, I mean, that game wasn't even close. Yeah, Maryland dominated them. And Tua's brother's pretty good, Ron, by the
Oh
way.
yeah.
The
Yeah, he
quarterback
is.
from Maryland. And I don't mean any disrespect by referring to him as Tua's brother. I just don't know his name off the top of my head. And again, here they go again. They're a 25-point underdog at home against Ohio State. Here's the thing about Ohio State, Ron. By a lot of school standards, their defensive numbers and their 3-0 start so far are really good. But by Ohio State standards, they've been vulnerable a little bit defensively. They're giving up around 23 a game and about 360 yards a game, if I'm not mistaken. And that's unlike Ohio State defenses that we've seen in the past. One thing we know from watching Maryland in the last 2 weeks in those huge upset wins is they can move the ball. So again, might want to keep an eye on them. I'm going to run through my database, and on Thursday we'll discuss this, how teams do. And I'm sure there's not a lot of instances where teams are coming off back-to-back double-digit underdog straight-up wins the way Maryland is going into the Ohio State game.
Yeah, and Penn State, and Nebraska, both teams going to that game looking for still their first win of the year.
Yeah, Penn State's a favorite too, on the road beside.
Yeah. So, hey, Frost coming from Central Florida, he was supposed to come and really elevate that program. Man, he's going to start feeling that pressure we're talking about of you got to get those, you got to start winning. You or not, you know what? In college football, there's a progression that, you're incorporating other coaches, players. And like, I remember hearing this weekend on game day that Chip Kelly now is going with his players, starting to get his players. Scott Frost is getting there. To me, I think they got to start McCaffrey at quarterback eventually. But there's the part of me is like, no, but you got to respect Martinez, because when he decided to come there, you were trying to get him and to get him to come to your program for the next 4 years, you gotta honor that commitment, and you can't pull the rug under a kid after he's had a couple of bad starts or the team's not going well. It's a very delicate mix, because you start doing that and you get the reputation that if you don't, you recruit to you commit to a school, and if you don't start well, they pull the rug. Kids will start transferring out, right?
Well, they do that now. So you're right, Ron. But the difference is he's a senior. He doesn't have a lot of options. I think he's a senior anyway. Scott Frost probably is going to get a much longer rope than most coaches would get at Nebraska. He was a very popular choice by not only the athletic department, but the fans, the avid followers of Nebraska. I believe he won the Heisman Trophy, if I'm not mistaken, as a quarterback for Nebraska. So he's going to get a little longer of a rope than we've seen with past Nebraska head coaches in recent years that had monumental failures there. So to see Nebraska. The college football is a lot better when teams like Nebraska and Penn State are good. You know what I mean, Ron?
If anybody can relate, it's probably Harbaugh at Michigan, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, Fresno State taking on UNO Rebels. So they won that one 40-27. Cincinnati just keeps winning 38-10, but 13-point favorite. Houston only scored 10 points in that game. But
Cincinnati, one of the best defenses in the country, Ron.
Yeah. Minnesota losing to Illinois. Boy, Lovie Smith he's probably
Minnesota beat Illinois, not lost. They beat them.
That's what I said. Minnesota beat Illinois 41. Okay. Lovie Smith not having a lot of fun. Pittsburgh, Florida State. I was a little surprised on this one.
I was too.
I thought Florida State would give them a little bit of a run for their money in this one, but a little surprise on the blowout. Vanderbilt, Mississippi State. Mississippi State finally. I think their last win was week 1 against with LSU.
LSU, and how that win doesn't look as good as then or now than it did then.
Yeah.
And again, they continue to struggle offensively against a bad Vanderbilt team. They jumped up 17-0, I believe, in their first 3 possessions of the game, and then they just faltered offensively from that time on.
And then we got Western Kentucky, which Sippy show, or not Sippy, I think it was him asking about, or somebody was asking about.
Yes, Western Kentucky and in Southern.
10-6.
Yeah.
Wow, it's almost like a baseball score right there.
Yeah.
UCLA 42-48 in a loss for Chip Kelly in Colorado, so a nice win for the Buffaloes there. Aggies 48-3 against the Gamecocks.
That
Baylor
surprised me a bit.
Oh, really?
Not that Texas A&M won the game, but by the margin of which they did so and how much they dominated in that game. I thought South Carolina would put up a better fight than that. So, yeah, the final score really shocked me.
Yeah, and when you got an experienced quarterback on the road in a hostile environment like South Carolina, any of those South Carolina, NC State, they're not like the LSUs, but they're still hard places to go and play in. But you're right, putting 48 points. So Mon got
A&M's a really good team, Ron. Keep an eye on. I mean, they're only lost to Alabama.
Yeah, and great coaching, right? Jimbo Fisher. Baylor, Iowa, 13.5 point, and just I think they're losing in that game too. I thought I saw the score for Baylor at one point, taking the lead. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and then Iowa State went up 38-24. Baylor scored a late touchdown, much to my chagrin, Ron, as Iowa State was my top play. So
sorry about that. Now, Clemson, Notre Dame, the game of the weekend, that was a double overtime win. And you were talking about the quarterback for Notre Dame, how he took the next step, right?
Yeah, he definitely did. I mean, he's a senior, but he just impressed me that I didn't think he had that capability to put together a complete game the way he did with both his legs and his arm and the accuracy in which he throws, especially on the run, Ron.
The one thing that I've noticed with Dabo Swinney, great halftime adjustments.
Yep.
He's one of the best coaches that have great halftime adjustments. But Cinderella, the clock struck midnight this weekend at South Bend, and Clemson normally wins those games, right?
Yeah.
But, you got Brian Kelly and his staff did a great job. And they never, there's always, we talked about this last week. We laughed about it. There's a point in the football game when the team has broken your will, and you just, it's almost like you're ready to tap and start thinking of supper. But you know what? Credit to Notre Dame for not allowing Clemson to keep, they kept going behind, and, Clemson kept scoring, and it could have been easy for them to fold the tents and say, all right, next week. But no, credit to them. They got the win. And now it sets up for a great possible rematch down
the ACC title game. You're right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look forward to that. That's the direction it's headed. Notre Dame, no, but I'm a little leery with their game coming up against Boston College on the road this week for reasons that I just alluded to, Ron.
Oregon, 35-14 win over the Stanford Cardinal as an 11-point favorite. Oregon's Oregon, right?
Yep.
Ohio State, 49-27 over Rutgers. Rutgers, Shiano doing a good job. He didn't win, but he got the cover.
He's keeping them competitive. They knocked off Michigan State in the opener. They played a nationally ranked Indiana team the following week, didn't get blown out. I think they lost by 11. And they gave the Ohio State, one of the top 4 teams in the country, they were competitive. I'm not going to say that they gave them all they can handle, but as the viewer brought up before, he liked Rutgers plus 38 in that game, and that was a very astute play. I'm just not a proponent of playing teams I don't think have a legitimate chance to win straight up. But in his defense, I mean, Ohio State was never even close to covering in that game. So, like you said, Ron, really impressed with the job that Greg Schiano has done initially with that Rutgers program. Yeah,
he's on the right path. Checklist, right? That's a checklist game. You're not there yet, but you're on your way.
How about those Arkansas Razorbacks, Ron?
You know what? I spent about a half hour handicapping that game, and I was really liking Tennessee, but I remember watching that Ole Miss Arkansas game, and I was really impressed with Arkansas. And I said, you know what? Arkansas at home. I'm not going to go against them. And sure, I'm glad Lane Kiffin doing a good job. Oh, not Lane Kiffin. Sorry, Arkansas Razorback did a good job as a +2 home underdog, 24-13 to get the win over the Vols.
Yeah, I mean, that was an Arkansas program that entered this season, I believe, on a 20-game SEC losing streak. And if I'm not mistaken, that was their third SEC win this week. So again, a game that I think we're going to talk about coming up this week. If I'm not mistaken, they're on. No, we're not. Yes, at Florida this week, Ron. So that'll be a true test. Florida coming off that big win against perennial rival Georgia, a perennial power in the SEC, and now they're going to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks after beating Georgia. So very interesting game that we're going to discuss on Thursday.
South Alabama lost to Coastal Carolina. And the reason I chuckle is because watching Liberty play and beating Virginia Tech, and I said, okay, who can give Liberty a run for their money? And sure enough, the last game on the schedule, Liberty against Coastal Carolina.
Wow. Might be a battle of undefeated teams, Ron.
Get your popcorn ready in December because this is going to be a good one.
Sunbelt's had a good year, Ron. They did well in non-conference action early on. And you got two really good teams in Coastal Carolina, UL Lafayette and Liberty. So,
yeah, no, you know what? And the warning shot was in week 1 where they, beat a Big 12 team, right? I can't remember. We talked about it. And we said these Sun Belt guys, man, they're or somebody called them the Fun Belt. And,
Louisiana Lafayette knocked off Iowa State in their on the road. So I mean. Last I checked, Iowa State's pretty good.
Washington State beat Oregon State 38-28, and the New Mexico Lobos got a win over or lost to YA Warriors 39-33 on the get out game, people call it, on those Saturday nights. Hopefully it gets you out of a bad day. But no, it was a good
late to watch them, Hey, the Hawaii games start at like 11 Eastern or I remember back in the day, they used to start games at 1 a.m. Eastern from Hawaii because of the time difference, So,
1 a.m.
You're a degenerate when you're trying to bail out at a 1 a.m. start and you're watching the whole game. So,
yeah. Oh, well. Hey, Ross, you know what? I like these, recap Tuesdays, go through because to me, you need that information and you run your ideas off someone else. And this way it prepares you for what's to come. And tomorrow we'll go through what we learned on the NFL. And then there'll be a couple of MAC games again tomorrow we can go through. But Ross, people are interested in buying your selections or your packages. Where can they do that?
Okay, NFL 29-18 since the first Monday night game, Monday night of the NFL season. 29-18, the last 47 this year with the NFL. That's good for 62%. And you can get my picks at either ATSStats.com, Ron's site, which now I'll be able to sell daily packages there as well, in addition to my weekly or monthly package. Or you can get them at my site, rbwins.com, either or. It doesn't matter to me. I would, if you're watching this show, I would highly advise you buy from me at atsstats.com, since Ron has been so nice to make me part of his show, which I really enjoy doing and look forward to doing it for a very long time with my friend Ron Raymond. And Ron, you're coming off a terrific weekend. I think you went 7-3 combined with the NFL and college football. But I'll let you, blow your own horn here.
Yeah, pretty good weekend in college football, free and premium picks, 4-2 in college, and in the total for NFL, I went 5-1. I also had a lean last night on the Jets, so 9-2 on the weekend with the NFL. So and college football, had a really good week. And what I'm really happy, Ross, is my best bets. I had Northwestern as my 5-star best bet in college, and I had the Carolina Panthers +10 against Kansas City. I've won now 4 of my last 5 best bets in the NFL. That's where I make my money in the NFL when it comes to the 5-star best bet. So good. Yeah. You know what? Thanks for that. I had a good weekend with that. And we talked about last week. When I have a bad weekend, you will know. I didn't have a good college football last weekend, as some of the members like to bring up. And which is fine.
Always willing to bring up, and when you win, it's very silent.
Yeah, I know. I just wish they would bring it up when I had a good week too, right? But
yeah,
hey, it is what it is. But Ross, no, good weekend. And again, folks, if you are interested in the Rain Report, you can get at atsstats.com. That's atsstats.com. We have a free Rain Report, which you can get. Just go to the pull down menu, go to any of the sports, NFL, college football. You'll see Rain Report and the free Rain Report. Check out the free Rain Report. It's a light version of the Rain Report. It's still a great tip sheet. And as you've seen through the feedback, a lot of people use it and they've won with it. And that's what we're here for. Hopefully we can bring winners to you. And me and Ross Benjamin, and we'll see this weekend with NFL and college football. Looking forward to that. All right. For a Tuesday, a Ruby Tuesday, as I always like to say, November 10th. He's Ross Benjamin. I'm Ron Raymond. This was the Rain Report, sports betting podcast for November 10th. Folks, have yourself a great rest of your day. And before I go, I'd like to thank everybody in the chat who brought their A game today in the questions. Really appreciate that. We're going to do NFL tomorrow, so bring that tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing you then. As always, shop for value, play those percentages. We'll see you back shortly with another